No. I want to pronounce it as no because that's how my friend spells the word mo, but I'm not too sure. Maybe it's different, but with an M, obviously. He says, "Damn, Terry, even making excuses for the Arsenal board." I'm not making excuses for the Arsenal board. It's not what I don't think that's what I said, and I don't think the panel interpreted it that way. I've obviously stated that all of our clubs will do PR at the right times. I remember meeting the guy that used to work for Spurs' press desk when I worked with Give Me Sport, and he said that when they had really big games or decisive games, they would have pieces of good news ready to release on the Monday or the Tuesday. So I absolutely know that they exist. But what I also think is true is that newspapers will have stories that they write and then they don't release. I know that to be a fact. And I also feel that sometimes what they'll do is when there's a bad result, they'll go, right, there is no coincidence that every single time United have lost under Amorim, a new story about a cut or a new story about a problem at the club is released the very next day. They very rarely release those stories the day after a victory because they won't get the same traction with Man United fans. So you can say I'm making an excuse for the Arsenal board. You're entitled to think that, but I think we have to look at this in a balanced way. And my question was going to be to the panel: do you think clubs should just stop briefing the press and keep fans 100% in the dark? Because I feel now that 80% of the time, whatever they tell us about our respective clubs seems to trigger us more. It's almost like knowing the truth seems to a point where we don't even know if it's the truth anymore. We're so cynical. Would it be better off with the clubs telling us zero, not briefing the media and keeping it silent, so you don't know whether they made a bid or not? Would you rather know nothing or keep it as it is?
I'd rather know more, to be honest with you, because I always feel like with my club that they don't, the briefing is always through someone else, through a journalist. I don't know whether or not I believe what they say because they've got things wrong and right in the past. I'd rather the club come out directly to the fans and say it how it is to get everyone at least on the same page of understanding where the club are trying to go. Because I believe right now, if Chelsea come out and said exactly what their belief was and their direction and how they see the club and how they intend it to go, and stated that one side of it is a business, and obviously that's part of football nowadays, and this is why we're doing things, I would probably be able to understand more why they are doing it and be less confused. And I think more honesty can only be a good thing, but I understand why they wouldn't do it. But I do feel a sense of broken trust when they say something and it was obviously a PR move and then that never materializes.
I'll say I'm more on the other side. I don't want them to come out and say everything because it's just going to be used against us. Be it if we want a striker and they just go out there and openly say we're looking for this in the market, it could be used against us in the transfer window. When we're looking to address certain areas on the team, it can be used against us in negotiations. And I think certain things need to be kept quiet, certain things need to be kept in the dark. And if you do expose things, sometimes I think it's a smokescreen, and I kind of think it benefits Arsenal. For example, James Maddison. We chased James Maddison to the point where Martin Odegaard's price dropped to 35 million. It ended up benefiting Arsenal, and I do think sometimes briefing the media can come to your advantage and your disadvantage, and sometimes you need to keep your cards at your chest. You can't show everybody your cards.
It works both ways, though, doesn't it? You can get a scenario where if you don't act and you don't hear anything from the club, the narrative in the fan base will be, but for instance, this window just gone right. Arsenal fans are gutted because Arsenal didn't sign a striker. But if you look throughout the 13 transfer windows that Arteta's had, he hasn't signed a goal scorer. If Arsenal come out and said the plan in the next two windows is to bring in an elite goal scorer, then everyone would be on board with it. But you're not really hearing anything. So you are to a degree being kept in the dark while also knowing what you need. Like everyone can see right now, if on deadline day you announced, let's say Osimhen, for instance, right? That changes the way every single team looks at you for the remainder of the title race. But you not knowing what the club are doing, you're there like twiddling your thumbs. And then when results don't go your way, it just angles more of a reaction towards the ownership and the manager. Because right now,
there's two different types of communications. Though there's communications about ongoing issues; those should be addressed. But addressing transfer issues and like things that your club needs from a manager or anybody at the club, I think can only negatively hurt you. because it will then drive up the price of what you need. The more demand, the more the price, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, but then at the same time, ago, you can see what the plan is. Like,
no, I get that. But why, just for transparency in transfers, why hurt yourself? Transparency in players leaving, contract situations, okay. But transparency in what needs we need to address, we don't always have the same needs. The club might address defensive issues when we are saying sign another midfielder. But then when they do address the defensive issues, we then realize why they did it, because they realized the midfield was weak in defending, and addressing the defense, you've now solidified the midfield more because they have a solid base behind them. You don't always have the same idea as the fans. The fans don't always have every idea. They don't always know all the answers. So sometimes telling everyone in the media what you want can negatively impact your signings.
Well, look at it this way, right? Ange said at the beginning of the window, the idea was to bring in a defender and a forward. And that's exactly what we did. We brought in a centre-back in Danso from Austrian centre-back from France, and we brought in Matthias Tell. So our way, at least when we got to the end of the window, I wasn't... Well, I still think it was a 4 out of 10. I still think it's a shocking window. But at least I knew what the club's idea was. So it does work both ways.
Yeah, I feel, I don't know about you, Dave. I sort of feel it depends on how you feel towards your club and owners. The comment here from Twitter says, Terry, was the PR different in the Sir Alex Ferguson era? I don't think, no, not necessarily. But Man United fans trusted Fergie more. So when he said things like there's no value in the market, what we now know is the Glazers weren't willing to sign off on 35 or 40 million pounds for Aguero. But at the time, we trusted him as a manager, so we didn't question it as much. And you think now maybe we should have done. At the same time, I've always stood on the stance that if Fergie started saying it's all going to crap here, that kind of panic could have sort of destabilized the club sooner. You know, you often hear crisis management people talk like this, that if we as the public were told about the real threats against us, the panic would set in. It would make it much harder to actually control situations. So I understand it from both ends. Man United, for instance, this week briefed, they've got these projects, which is Project 21, which is the idea of winning, how they're going to build the squad and rejuvenate the club to win the 21st title. There's Project 1, which is how to get the ladies team to win their first ever WSL title, and it's all part of a wider product they're calling Project 150, which is about when we hit this was all to happen by the year 2028, which is our 150 year anniversary. And it reads great. What people don't then like is they see the buzzwords, and the buzzwords are there because these are being written by corporate people. And I sort of feel that, and this is a question, if we as fans got to have access to football clubs, the questions I would be asking is the older heads, have words like projects and processes been in place for a long time? And the reason why I think they have is I was watching the 99 documentary, and it was a snippet from 1999 in the summer where United had problems. And one of the players at the time said, it's a bit of a struggle here at the moment, but Fergie's been telling us to trust the process. So Fergie in the summer of 1998 was telling the team to trust the process. So these words and phrases have been around a lot longer, but we're somewhat, and I kind of blame Arsenal for this, if I'm being honest, because of I think people disdain for Arsenal and Arteta has led to it. But I'd like to understand how long clubs have spoken in that corporate language behind the scenes. Because if it turns out they've been doing it for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, I think we as fans can relax. I think a lot of us are very cynical when, I'm reading this plan, but I haven't seen those improvements in the first 3 months under Amorim, so it must all be bullshit. So then part of me thinks, well, they're better off saying nothing. But if they said nothing, I think the same fans would say, we're blindsided. They don't talk to us. There's no community. Like Man United fans say the Glazers and Ineos are the same. And I understand some of the criticism. I do. But Ineos are giving us a lot of updates and information about what they're doing, which the Glazers never did. And they're still being told they're the same. And I feel like the clubs are sometimes in a lose-lose situation. If they say less...
There's just no perfect way to do it.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're going to upset someone because someone's going to either know too much or not enough. And me personally, I miss yellow box Sky Sports breaking news, you sign this player, because it was just like, oh, it's actually exciting. When I look at my phone, it's like Fabrizio's told me that this player's going here and he's going there, and it's just like kind of ruins the fun. There's a bit of fun that's gone missing. Football's just too like.
There's no
It's
atmosphere, is
too-
there? Like,
Yep.
It's
sitting
just
watching
too
deadline
robotic
day.
now.
Like,
It's
David,
like-
do you remember the Pedro Neto deal in the summer? Like, no one knew
Yeah.
anything about that, and when it hit, it was actually like a reminiscent feeling of what we used to get before.
Yeah.
this.
Whereas
Like, Harry
now it's
Redknapp
like,
rolling
oh,
up in his
Chelsea.
Range Rover,
Yeah.
This is
window
what I'm
down.
saying.
Gonna sign any players? Yeah, terrific player, terrific
Which is,
player.
but
And
I
that's
see,
the best
David,
thing
I
about
see
it.
this on the
I like
transfer
this
video.
place.
I say that on the transfer videos we do. Like, I haven't changed the way I do transfer videos in 8 years. When I was the Devil's Bus TV, right through till now, I do them in exactly the same way I always have done. This is the story that a journalist has published. This is what some fans are saying. This is my opinion. What do you think? Why did I structure it that way? Because that is how football fans, and this is the one thing it does upset me. That is how football fans that I surrounded myself with, both at school, at work, in my family home, and people I met all across the country at football. That is how you discuss transfers. Did you see the back of the mirror? Did you see that? Did you see that on Sky yesterday? Did you hear that on TalkSport? Did you see that on Teletext? That's how old I am. Did you see that we're linked to so-and-so? And you would sit and talk about, oh, I don't like him as a player. Oh, I love him as a player. Where would he fit in? Where would he go? Modern day football fans are killing that. Well, that's just bullshit. Until he's here, let's not talk about it. And that was the excitement of it.
Actually,
It was
Terry,
and
it's
then-
not
and then-
modern day. It's
It's
the
not
old
modern
school
day.
fans. It's the old school fans who are telling me, until he's holding up the shirt, don't talk to me about transfers. Until I see it on
was
Sky
never-
Sports, don't talk to me about transfers.
it was never
I
that
think
way.
the old school fans.
Maybe you're right, mate. I look at it and think it's very, very strange. And listen, I've got no beef with any of the journalists because that would just be weird to beef a journalist over transfer stories. But there'll be a good rumor that comes out, and it gets that buzzy feeling that you mentioned, and then someone who's considered a tier one, right? And I always use that phrase because it's a colloquial term that everybody understands. But actually, when you speak to journalists, like for instance, Duncan Castles is one of the most respected journalists amongst journalists, but yet avid football fan, like Twitter followers, they think he's an absolute bum. So I like the phrase because it doesn't reflect what journalists actually think. But the point is, this is an exciting transfer. Everyone's talking about it. And then Ornstein goes, yeah, I don't think that will happen. Everyone goes, well, that's crap then. And I remember being on holiday as a kid. And now you've all done this. You're in Spain, right? You're on the Sun Lounge. You get the papers because they're 3 days behind when you're in Spain. And you read it and you go, oh my God, we're linked to so-and-so. And you're like, I can't wait for the paper to come out tomorrow morning because we might have signed him by then. And it was just, and then you speak about it a lot. It has kind of gone, as they say, the game's gone. Football's gone. Do you know what I mean?
Arsenal used to
stuff.
tweet
I love
rumors, transfer rumors back in 2012.
You're on mute, by the way, Dan.
Oh, I was just saying, yeah, I remember that. Like your official Twitter account used to put it out, didn't it?
It'd be like, we're linked to Roberto Firmino in summer of 2020.
Man United's website used to have its own like tabloid page where you used to put stories. And I was playing Football Manager back in 2006. I remember because it was when the German World Cup was on. And he was really good on the game. He was a Swedish player, I think it was Swedish, called Christian Wilhelmsson. And he was wicked on this game. And then I was on the Man United website and they put up a news story that we were linked to him. And I was like, oh, Dad, this player's he wasn't very good. He was better on the game than in real life. That's how I know as well that a lot of youngsters do the whole like, this player's wicked. They've never seen him. He's just good on a game. Because I was young once too. I was young once as well.
Terry can back me on this. I've been talking about Sesko for years. The reason I found Sesko in the first place was because of Football Manager. But then I didn't just sit there and go like, he's got 20 on Football Manager. He's a baller. No, you've got to go actually watch him. Like you do have to go. Watch him. I still think he's very impressive.
He played us, David. Do you remember? I think it was the early games in either the Champions League or Europa League for like Salzburg, and he didn't do anything. And like everyone was sort of like, "Oh no, who's this kid?"
This
blah
guy,
blah blah.
bro?
Yeah, and then obviously he's developed.
He's big striker who kicks ball hard.
We played
I love that striker.
Genk, didn't we? And like I remember I had Kevin De Bruyne as like a wonder kid on FIFA. Like and we played Genk and I was like to my mate, oh, he's quality, blah, blah, blah. What am I at that age? Like 18. And then literally a couple of summers later, we signed him. My mate was like, oh yeah, you said about him. I'd probably watched him play like 3 times in the Champions League ever before we signed him.
Yeah, no, the player I remember the most when it comes to this was Mo Salah. Because growing up, when he played against us and he was in Basel, I was like, this boy's going far. Then he joined our club. He was terrible. I was like,
Let me ask you guys this. Why do you think there's not more trades in football?
More what?
Trades?
More trades. Like one-for-one player transfers.
Because that's heavy in like North American sports, isn't it?
Yeah, well, the reason for that is because it doesn't help with PSR and FFP, because essentially when you sell a player, you can show it on your trading accounts as say 50 million straight in. When you sell a player, it's essentially say it'll come up as 10 million straight out. So that's why even when they're considered trades, they're often, even some of the trades in the past that have happened, on the actual trading accounts, they're shown as, and contracts, they're two separate transactions because it helps the clubs with their accounting. So that's the reason why you don't see it.
Like Conor Gallagher and João Felix is a trade, like in theory, but it's
even their fees are very close to what they both.
Or you end up like the Mavericks and you get shafted.
But even Amari Kellerman and Matson and stuff, David, was obviously like as close to trades as we've seen in football because it was like to benefit each team on PSR. So I actually don't know the exact reason, Agal. I think Terry's probably right about the PSR stuff, but obviously I know that huge one just happened in the NBA. Is that why you're saying it?
Yeah, no, how they got away with that is.
I remember Eto'o and Ibrahimovic when that happened.
Yeah, that's true.
I was like, this is gonna happen more often now, because I'm like, but it never really happened that much.
No, you kind of know as well. There's a lot that sound like it, and then you always, again, you get the journalists that just do the whole, these are separate transactions. So there's probably trades that we think are trades in the past that were never actually trades. It's just two separate transactions, and you'll probably find it's to do with accounting. So remember, ladies and gentlemen, net spend is not real. Which at least that debate is
net spend. Terry, it's the first year Arsenal have been a positive net spend in like 7 years.
But are you a positive? Are you really positive? Or are you negative?
Technically, we're 6 million. We're 11 million positive from the summer.
Generally, you're always, again, in the official terms, you're nearly always up rather than down in the short term, because anything you sell comes in straight away and what you buy goes out. The problem is, like with Man United, we have around 200 million a year legit going out towards previous transfers of players, but that's what happens because of amortization. But because we've had so many failures, we've got to keep buying. And this is the thing with Chelsea. Chelsea's plan works if they can get to a summer or two's time where they don't have to spend large amounts of money. If they keep having to spend 200 or 300 million each year, at some point, all those small payments that you're amortizing will add up to, hang on, we've got like a 300 million pound a summer bill now on players, on some that might not even be at the club anymore, that might not even be there. And although you can balance it for a period with player sales and your profit and loss, you still have to pay for those players, if that makes sense. So like Anthony at Man United, say we sell him in the summer just for 30 million. We still are probably going to owe 50 odd million pounds over the next 4 years to Ajax for him that we still have to pay. It's still an actual payment that needs to be made. So yes,